The Orioles offense, which has been really carrying this team throughout the season, decided to take the night off in DC on Tuesday, but it was okay because Dean Kremer returned to 2022 Dean Kremer form as the O's took down the Nationals. I'll have the recap coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Wednesday, April 19th, 2023, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' 1-0 win over the Washington Nationals on Tuesday night to take the first game in the Beltway battle. I'll get to the 5 things you need to know from that one. Then I'll break down Dean Kremer's performance, specifically 6 2/3 strong scoreless innings, what he did to get back to his form of last year, and then a couple of Orioles news and notes to finish off the pod. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. So let's jump right into it here. Orioles and Nationals. The O's win it 1-0 over the Nats at Nats Park on Tuesday. Did want to just off the top here give a little bit of an apology. If you are watching today's episode on YouTube, you may notice something a little different. If you are listening to today's episode, you are probably noticing something different as well. I apologize for the audio quality of today's episode. The microphone that I got myself when I started hosting this podcast back in January of 2020, which kind of tells me, wow, how long it's been, officially died around the 7th inning of Tuesday night's game. And so here we are, old-fashioned way, headphones in. I apologize for the low audio quality of today's episode. The hope is that by tomorrow's episode, there'll be a new mic here and we'll be on to regular business. But again, just wanted to apologize for that off the top. But either way, Orioles 1, Nationals 0. The final score from Nats Park on Tuesday night as the O's take the opener of the quick 2-game Beltway series and get to 10-7 on the season. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' 1-0 win over the Nationals. And the first thing you need to know is that Dean Kremer got his mojo back on the mound for the O's. After 3 bad starts to open the year, Kremer was nails against the Nationals on Tuesday night. 6 2/3 scoreless innings, allowing just 4 hits with 6 strikeouts and no walks on just 95 pitches. Only 4 hard hit balls against Dean on Tuesday. And I get it. It was maybe the worst lineup in baseball in the 2023 Washington Nationals, but still impressive for Kremer to do it because, remember, Kremer just faced another pretty bad lineup in his last couple of starts, and the Orioles starters in general last week faced the A's, didn't really get anybody out. So still impressive by Dean, and I'll break down his performance further coming up later on the pod. But the second thing you need to know from this one is that, well, the Orioles offense just decided to kind of not show up in this game. 1 run on 5 hits for the Orioles after they scored 20 runs in 3 games and drew 26 walks in that series win over the White Sox in Chicago this weekend. 5 hits, 4 walks, 1 run, had a couple of chances with runners in scoring position, didn't convert. Only 7 hard hit balls in total on the day. Didn't get much from the lineup in this one. However, the third thing you need to know is that there were a couple of good swings put on some baseballs today, and I'd say Jorge Mateo, Austin Hayes, and Ryan Mountcastle had those at least good swings. Mateo and Mountcastle, the only 2 Orioles to have multiple hard hit balls on the day. They each had 2. Mateo had a double in this game, did not strike out, with a 1 for 3, now hitting .370 on the year. Mountcastle had a 1 for 4 with the 2 hard hit balls. And then Austin Hayes did drive in the only run of the game. His RBI single in the top of the fourth inning off of national starter Josiah Gray put the Orioles up 1-0. You kind of figured there'd be more scoring in this game after that, but there was not. Hayes was actually thrown out trying to stretch it to second after the throw came home and was wide, and Ryan Mountcastle scored. And that was it. Nats had a couple chances. Orioles had more chances, but not a lot of offense happening in this game. But Austin Hayes stays hot. Jorge Mateo stays hot. And, you know, when you shut a team out, all you need is one, and the O's got that one on Tuesday night. Fourth thing you need to know from this one is that apparently Yennier Cano is just the Orioles' number 2 reliever right now. It goes Félix Bautista and Yennier Cano right now. So after Dean Kremer went 6 2/3, the Orioles went to Danny Coulombe to get the left-hander out, and he retired C.J. Abrams to finish off 7 scoreless innings. And I figured with the 8th inning coming that, especially with the top of the lineup due up, the O's would probably go to Brian Baker in the 8th and Félix Bautista in the 9th. Instead, they go to Yennier Cano, who got called up over the weekend, had back-to-back amazing high-leverage appearances on Friday and Saturday. He gets Sunday and Monday off, and he's right back out there. What does he do? 1, 2, 3, 8th inning with a strikeout on just 9 pitches. So still not allowed to run in his 3 appearances this year with the Orioles. He's attacking the strike zone, which is something you haven't seen from him. And it was 8 sinkers and a slider. He didn't even throw that changeup, which many argue is his best pitch. His velo was a little down at 94. It didn't matter. It literally did not matter. He got a swinging strikeout, got the ground balls he needed. He's fun to watch. I mean, he is fun to watch when he's throwing strikes. He's a high leverage guy for Brandon Hyde in the bullpen now. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from this one is that Félix Bautista looked not unhittable, but still put up the 0 in the 9th inning and got the save for the Orioles. Now, when Félix came in, it was quick work to start. Set down the first 2 batters in Joey Meneses and Heimer Candelario fairly easily, and then he got ahead of Luis Garcia 0-2, and it looked like, all right, quick 1-2-3 inning. Félix stays dominant. O's win 1-0. But credit to Garcia, he battled back, stayed in the count, got a 3-2 high fastball, laced it into center field for a base hit to keep the game going. The Nats use Alex Call as a pinch runner. Félix doesn't even try holding him on, and Call steals second standing up without a throw. And all of a sudden, tying runs in scoring position, you got a solid hitter in Keibert Ruiz at the plate. And Bautista, you could tell throughout this outing, just had no feel for the splitter. It was similar to how Bautista looked in his first 2 outings of the year, where he just did not know where that splitter was going. I would argue Tuesday night's appearance in terms of splitter command was actually his worst of the season, worse than that opening day appearance, worse than the second appearance of the year. He just had no idea where that thing was going. And so as the inning went on and guys were fouling off pitches, they were taking splitters, he was throwing more and more pitches. I mean, Félix had to throw 22 pitches to get this save in the 9th inning. You could tell that the Nats were just sitting on the fastball, and Ruiz got turned around on one of the fastballs that he almost roped it down the line for a game-tying double. It went just foul. But at 3-2, 2 outs, runner on second in a 1-run game in the 9th inning, Félix with no feel for the splitter. You know Ruiz is sitting on that 100-mile-per-hour fastball. Bautista still has the guts to go with the splitter on 3-2, knowing he could walk the winning run onto first base. And he throws a splitter that starts above the zone, drops into the zone, and Ruiz rolls it over to second base. Adam Frazier makes the play to end the game. That was a gutsy move by Bautista. And that pitch still wasn't a good splitter, but it was good enough that it was competitive. Just the gusto to throw that pitch right there shows me he's even on a different level this year than he was last year. And he closes out the Orioles' 10th win of the season. But Félix got the job done. Offense did just enough, but truly the star of this game, obviously, was Dean Kremer. Dean Kremer, 6 2/3 scoreless innings. And when we come back, I'll break it all down. How did Kremer put those 3 bad starts behind him and kind of look like an ace out there on Tuesday night? But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. So the Orioles take down the Nationals 1-0 on Tuesday night to open up the quick little two-game series in the Beltway battle. And of course, the star of the game on Tuesday night was Dean Kremer, who made his fourth start of the season. And after three pretty rough outings to start the year, Kremer was flat out dominant on Tuesday night. As I mentioned before, 6 2/3 innings, no runs on 4 hits, 6 Ks to no walks, 95 pitches, and just 4 hard hit balls as he lowers his ERA by 3.5 runs to 6.16 on the season through 4 starts. And listen, Kremer was bad. I mean, Kremer was bad to start the year. He completed more than 5 innings Tuesday night for the first time all season. His line in his first 3 starts of the year, 12 1/3 innings, 16 hits, 13 runs, 8 Ks, 6 walks, a 9.49 ERA. It was not good for Kremer. He was getting hit around. He wasn't pitching deep into games. Basically was looking nothing like his 2022 version of himself. Then he came out there on Tuesday night, and I understand. The Nats lineup is terrible. This lineup is terrible, okay? Like, Joey Meneses is hitting third, and he was a great story at the end of last year. But Joey Meneses went 0 for 4 with a strikeout. He now has a 552 OPS on the season. They've got Lane Thomas hitting leadoff. They've got Candelario hitting fourth. This is a bad lineup. But that doesn't change the fact that there's still major league hitters that Dean Kremer mowed down through 6 2/3 innings. And it's still impressive. Now, the question is, what did he do different? Well, the number one thing was he went to his fastball. Now, he went to his four-seamer pretty much the same amount he has all year. 40% on the year, 41% of the time he threw that four-seamer on Tuesday night, 39 of his 95 pitches. However, he went to the other fastballs more. He added 15 sinkers and 14 cutters, meaning 78 of his 95 pitches Tuesday night were some version of his fastball. It was 11 changeups, 11 sweepers, and 5 curveballs to go with it, but he was the fastball guy on Tuesday night. The reason why? Well, his velo was way up. The four-seamer was up from 95 to 96, topping out at 97 multiple times. The sinker was up from 91 to 93, and that topped out at 97 as well. And the cutter was up from 89 to 91, topping out at 92 on the night. The velo was just up, and the Nats hitters could not get to any of his 3 fastballs on the night. Kremer induced 53 swings in the game, had 15 whiffs, 7 of them on the four-seamer, 1 on the sinker, and 4 on that cutter in this game Tuesday. And I think the best kind of stretch to describe how he used his fastballs on Tuesday was what happened in the 3rd inning. He allows a leadoff single and then a 2-base error from Gunnar Henderson. And all of a sudden, the Nats have 2nd and 3rd, nobody out, with the top of the lineup up, Lane Thomas coming to the plate. And yeah, it's not the most imposing top of the lineup in baseball, but presumably it's the Nats' 3 best hitters, and they're all big league hitters. Kremer just locks in and says, I'm going fastball. Strikes out Lane Thomas, strikes out Dom Smith, strikes out Joey Meneses, does it on 14 consecutive fastballs. I believe it was a mix of the four-seamer and the sinker, but it was 14 consecutive fastballs, all of them 95 to 97, and just blew it by all 3 hitters, gets out of a 2nd and 3rd no-outs jam to keep the game scoreless. And it was only the 3rd inning, but he was fired up, screaming into his glove as he came off the mound. An awesome moment for Dean Kremer. And listen, the stuff played up. The stuff looked good. He also got 2 whiffs on his sweeper on 4 swings, which was good to see. All in all, obviously his best start of the year. Would have fallen in as one of his better starts of 2022 as well. That's how good he was on Tuesday night. And, you don't know if he's going to continue to use his fastballs like this, because this is, again, the worst lineup he is going to face. probably get to face the Tigers in a couple weeks. They could be worse, but I think the Nats lineup is the worst he's going to face. So maybe he won't be able to blow fastballs by every team. But he said it after the game as well, talking to the media. He realized that the Nats just could not catch up to his 97-mile-per-hour fastball on Tuesday night. And he said it would have been doing him just a service, basically, to just lay in an off-speed pitch. So he said, I'm just going to keep going fastball. And that's what he did. And it was fun to watch. And, he really didn't use his off-speed pitches a whole lot in the game either. And a lot was because he didn't have to, but, he really didn't have a feel for his changeup. He threw it 11 times, but, he got one whiff on the pitch, got one called strike. Otherwise, that changeup was everywhere. I mean, he was throwing that thing in the dirt, throwing it up and in, just had no feel for it really. Throwing less curveballs like usual. The sweeper did look good. He got a couple of whiffs, and that looked good at times, but he was just a four-seam sinker cutter guy, and it worked. And again, not going to work against better offenses, at least to this level, but it shows that Dean Kremer can play with a lot of fastballs and can get guys out. And that is a huge step forward for Dean, who was just horrendous in his first 3 starts of the year. He was good Tuesday night, and hopefully he can build on that moving forward for the Orioles, because he was throwing strikes like he usually does. I mean, at one point, he had thrown first pitch strikes to 16 of the first 18 batters he faced. So getting ahead always helps. Putting guys away with that fastball helps even more. And Dean Kremer, he also helped out the bullpen, really, because the Orioles only had to use Danny Coulombe for one batter. Coulombe came in, 5 pitches, gets a pop out. Yennier Cano, 9 pitches. Now, Félix Bautista did labor a little bit with the 22 pitches in the 9th, but they still only used 3 relievers. And, theoretically, Coulombe and Cano probably still available for Wednesday night. Félix maybe not, but you have almost everybody ready in the bullpen. And that's good because the O's are getting Kyle Bradish back off the injured list on Wednesday. And he could go deep in the game, but you never know what he's going to look like off the IL. So it's nice to have the bullpen set. So coming up next to finish off the pod, we'll talk about Bradish's return, what could be the corresponding move, and where the Orioles move forward from here as they go for the quick sweep over the Nationals. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Ultimate Baseball GM, one of the coolest games I've played in a while on my phone, because right in your pocket, anytime, gives you a chance to try to be a Major League GM. And this game is free to download, okay? You can play it offline, play it on the go. Doesn't really drain your battery. It's the perfect game because it's a step up from, games like fantasy baseball or MLB The Show. You really are more in depth with hiring coaches and staff and managing finances, dealing with injuries and difficult personalities, scouting, drafting, free agency, trade deadline. You're doing it all on Ultimate Baseball GM. And it's a realistic game world. It's tough. It is tough to do well in this game. That's what makes it fun. You can also compete against your friends. I'm competing against all the other Locked On MLB hosts, and to be honest, all of us aren't doing that well. But Locked On Orioles listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probaseballgm.com. Scan the code or look it up in the app stores. That's probaseballgm.com. Ultimate Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. So after the Orioles' 1-0 win over the Nationals on Tuesday night, they will go for the sweep here on Wednesday nights in D.C. against the Nats in what's kind of turned into Camden Yards South at this point, with the Nationals certainly tanking at this point. I think we can all agree they're not really trying to win baseball games, and the Orioles on the up and up. The O's have always played well against the Nats and have always at times taken over that ballpark, but they were really doing it on Tuesday night, and it'll probably be the same thing tonight. Mackenzie Gore, though, is going to go for the Nationals in Game 2 of this series, the rookie left-hander who came over to the Nationals in the Juan Soto trade last year from the Padres, 24-year-old lefty. He's been good so far this year. Josiah Gray's been good. Gore's been better. In his 3 starts, he struck out 18 batters in 15 innings and a 3.00 ERA. However, he's had 2 good starts and 1 bad one. He's coming off the bad one where he only lasted 3 2/3 and gave up 2 runs, walked 4 batters. O's hoping the offense kind of wakes up and picks it up against Gore. Now, officially, the Orioles have not yet named a starter for Wednesday, as of recording here, about 10:30 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday night. But we pretty much all know it's going to be Kyle Bradish. The reason he hasn't been named is the Orioles haven't activated him off the injured list yet. Remember, he got hit in the foot by that line drive back in Texas a couple of weeks ago, had to leave his start in the second inning. Well, Bradish was all good to go. He made a rehab start in Double-A Bowie on Friday night. Did give up 3 earned runs, gave up a homer, but generally looked healthy and the stuff looked good. So the O's said he's ready to go. So literally today is the first day he's eligible to come off the 15-day injured list. And all signs are pointing to the O's are going to activate him, and Bradish will make his third start of the season here on Wednesday night against the Nationals. You never know how far they're going to push him. You know, he went 4+ innings Friday night. Expect 5 innings out of him, but the O's do have a rested bullpen, like I talked about, so that's certainly going to help them out in this game. Luckily, it seems like the foot's not really bothering Bradish at all anymore, and because it wasn't an arm injury or any kind of upper body thing, it seems like his stuff should just be back to what it was, and you should expect a good amount out of who I still think is going to be the Orioles' ace this year in Kyle Bradish. But the O's did make a roster move on actually Monday before Tuesday's game, as Keegan Aiken returned from the paternity list. The Orioles did activate him back to the roster, and they optioned Spencer Watkins back down to AAA. Watkins came up last Thursday when the Orioles optioned Cole Irvin and put Aiken on the paternity list. Watkins came up along with Yennier Cano. Of course, Cano just came in and established himself as a go-to reliever. Watkins was there to be a long reliever, an emergency starter. A situation just never arose to get Watkins into a game for the 3 games he was here with the O's during that Chicago series. He made sense to go down, so he does go down to AAA. Aiken comes back. But now the O's, honestly, they do have a tougher decision to make here on Wednesday when they do activate Bradish off the injured list, because they're going to have to take out somebody who has made an impact, at least somewhat of an impact, for them out of the bullpen this year. They're not going to send down a starter because right now with Cole Irvin in AAA, the Orioles only have 4 starters on the active roster right now. So Bradish gets the rotation back to 5, which means they're going to send down a reliever. And you basically have 3 candidates at this point. I mean, you can't send Yennier Cano back down. So it's optioning Keegan Aiken, optioning Logan Gillespie, or DFAing Austin Voth. Now we'll start with Voth, who it was nice to see him get the 1-2-3 inning in kind of a high leverage spot, holding that lead in the 8th on Sunday in Chicago. His stuff is still really good. He still has great spin rates. The Orioles still believe in him. And because he's out of options and you'd have to DFA him, almost certainly another team would claim him. So the Orioles would lose him. They would not be able to slip him through waivers. I think because of that, and because he can give you length out of the bullpen and be an emergency starter, I think the O's are going to hold on to Voth for a little bit longer. I think it's going to be down to optioning Aiken or Gillespie because both still have major league or minor league options. And I think just because Aiken's a lefty and Gillespie has pitched a lot lately and hasn't looked great the last couple of outings, I do think it's going to be Logan Gillespie going back to AAA to kind of reset and Kyle Bradish joining the rotation. But we will see what move the Orioles make. And when they do make the move, and when they do play their game 2 against the Nationals, I'll be back here on the pod tomorrow recapping it all and hopefully talking about a nice little beltway sweep for the Orioles. But that's all coming up on tomorrow's episode. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.